Good morning everyone and welcome to Oxwide on Friday 23rd of April. I'm Matthew Traynor, Chief Exec of Oxleas, and it's a lovely sunny day in Bexley, so it's nice to see some familiar faces on today's call. We've got a couple of things we're going to go through today. We're going to be talking to two of our colleagues from the Metropolitan Police about Operation Cavell, which is an initiative the Metropolitan Police have launched to support NHS staff who experience violence in the workplace and to support us in making sure that staff feel properly protected and able to report their concerns. We've got a short film on our new strategy, and I'll also be talking to KELLI and Neil Springham about our new mental health staff network as well. So there's a lot of good stuff coming up today. First, I just wanted to say a couple of things about some trust news. The vaccination programme is continuing at pace, and I think we're now at the point where 7 out of 10 of our frontline staff have been vaccinated now. I've said, as I mentioned, I've had my second vaccine myself, as I know Iffy and others have as well, so we're getting to that stage now where the majority of the workforce is protected. And the important thing to remember about the vaccination, it doesn't mean that you can't get COVID, but it does mean that if you get it, you're far less likely to become seriously ill. And what we're starting to see impressively in the national data is that the infection rates are at a pretty low level, but really those hospital rates and the death rates are really dropping off. As we look towards the rest of the year, there's modelling that suggests we might get another wave. I think it's the third wave, depends how you count, but really probably a third wave around the sort of July, August time, certainly a bit later in the year. But what we need to look at when we get to that point is the number of people that are going into hospital, not necessarily the number of infections. Because unlike in previous waves, those of us who've been vaccinated, many of us who've already had COVID as well, there's that degree of protection in there. So we're going to see things starting to change as we go into the autumn period. What I would say, as I said last time, is make sure May, June, July, you get some time outside. If you can get away, visit family, get some proper holiday, because I know we've all had a rough year of it, and actually a lot of the breaks we've taken haven't been as good and as satisfying as you'd want them to be. I managed 2 nights away in a self-catering place just over Easter, and it was the first time in 7 months that we'd left the house. And I think just to open the curtains and not see the same view is a huge boost emotionally, you know, so do what you can to get some time away and make the best of these next 3 or 4 months, because the autumn will bring some more COVID challenges, but it will be a different set of challenges to the one that we've seen before, and probably far more pressure on general and acute beds this time than there will be on intensive care. So there's modelling happening regionally at the minute for us to understand what the impact of that will look like. But in the meantime, you can do your part by, if you've not had your vaccination, getting yourself sorted out there. If you have had your vaccination, keep doing the sensible things to make sure that we stop the spread of COVID, and do get some downtime, get some rest while we've got that opportunity, because it's been a tough old year. Okay. 2 other things I wanted to mention today. Around a year ago, I wrote to all of you about the issues that were bubbling up predominantly through the States around Black Lives Matter. And within the NHS in London, you know, a significant part of our workforce, almost half of our workforce, are people from an ethnic minority background. And within Oxleas, we've got very significant people at all levels of the organisation who represent our ethnic minority staff. And what we saw, the George Floyd's death and a number of other incidents in the States, I think brought to the head what's been, in many people's experiences, decades of discrimination within society in England and also within the NHS and in the workplace. And it created an opportunity for a lot of us to have some conversations that I think were well overdue, in some cases very difficult, and things we're still working through now. But for us as a trust, it meant that we launched our Building a Fairer Oxleas initiative, where we're trying to address issues around development, opportunity, learning, support, but also addressing the way that we treat each other with respect in the workplace. And I think we'll talk a bit more about KELLI and Neil about that later. But this week what we saw was that the trial of the police officer, the former police officer, accused of killing George Floyd concluded, and for the first time in history in America, I think we've seen a case here where a police officer has been convicted. And it's also the week where we mark the anniversary of Stephen Lawrence's death, I think, which for lots of us who live around this part of London is something that we remember well, and something that sent shockwaves through our community that are still felt today. And Doreen Lawrence and the family have done a huge amount working with the Metropolitan Police and with the local authorities and organisations like Oxleas and others to raise awareness of this. And what we've seen, I think, in the last 12 months and in the verdict this week is a sense that there is a sea change in organisations like ours, in organisations like the Met and others, and how we engage and talk about these issues. And I don't want to pretend that we haven't got a long way to go on this, but I know that for many of you, the events of this week will have felt very significant. And I think that sense, actually, that people are finally starting to be held to account for inappropriate behaviour, and that for organisations like ours, we can recognise some of the ways that we've behaved and some of the changes that we need to make, and we need to continue to show through our actions as well as through our words that we've listened to the impact of this on many of our colleagues, and that we want to be an organisation and we want to build a broader society where we recognise and celebrate the things that are different between us and that give us that great sense of strength through our diversity. So a really important week for us. I will be following up the letter I wrote to you all last year with another letter in the course of the next week or so to reflect on what we've done in terms of building a fairer Oxleas. But for the many of you who've contacted me in the last couple of days about the verdict in the States, and for some of the conversations I've seen happening to mark the death of Stephen Lawrence, that anniversary as well. Thanks to all of you for supporting us with this conversation. And I think, you know, it's a shame we've had to have these kinds of incidents happen to bring it to the fore, but also there was a sense, I think, of satisfaction of justice being done this week that for far too long has been absent in the debate about race and the way that some of our institutions treat many of our colleagues. So there we go. So that's, I know that's a tough set of conversations we've got to have around this, and we'll keep that dialogue going over the course of the rest of the year. And thanks for all of you with your support for that. And Steve just told me I'm rustling my paper in front of the microphone, which I will stop doing now. So thanks, Steve, for that. So first up today, and we're talking about the police. The Metropolitan Police are great partners of the NHS actually, and in my years in the health service, we spent a lot of time talking to and working with our colleagues in the Met, often apologising to them for the amount of time they spent waiting in A&E at the Prue when I was working there as well. And now I know actually we do a lot of work with our colleagues there, both in terms of Section 136, but also more broadly in across South London now in terms of how we support people with severe mental illness when they become unwell and when they need the support of us and other statutory services to try to protect them and sometimes to protect the public around that. Now, a couple of weeks ago, at the end of March, the Met has launched Operation Cavell. And one of the issues I know many of you raise is about the violence that you experience in the workplace, whether you're in community teams or in ward environments. And first I'm going to ask Dr. Ify Okocha to say about some of the work we've done in Oxleas over the last few years to address violence and aggression. But I'm also delighted that we've been joined by Inspector Rachel Cross and Sergeant Verity Haylett from the Met, who are looking after this across South London in the South London BCU, and we'll be hearing a bit more about the work they're doing through Operation Cavell. So first off though, Ify, I know you've been championing the issue of addressing violence and aggression against staff over the last couple of years. Tell us a bit about what we've been doing on this front.
Thank you, Matthew, and hello, everyone. So there's no doubt at all that the NHS, irrespective of the nature of the trust, staff have experienced quite a bit of violence and aggression, and that's been the case within Oxleas. I myself have been a victim many years ago when I was assaulted, and with the help of the police, we had to press charges. And having worked on a unit, the TAN at the time, where there tended to be quite a bit of violence and aggression, I saw it firsthand, and I know that it does continue. And so over the years, we've been trying our absolute best to address this within Oxleas, working with clinicians and the police, and I'm really excited that the police have launched this operation. We'll hear more from Rachel and Haylett in a minute. Within Oxleas, we've tried our absolute best to refine our policies to make sure that staff are really quite clear about what they should do. We've worked with clinicians to make sure that clinicians understand, particularly consultants, what they need to do and how they need to support staff, because when we've looked at the data, it is exceptional for someone like myself, a consultant, to be assaulted, but most of the assaults are on support staff and the more junior staff whom we really need to do our absolute best to support. So the policies and the procedures are really important. Police liaison is something we have strengthened across Oxleas, meeting regularly with partners, making sure that they are there to support us when needed. And we've also done quite a bit of work on how we support staff who have been affected, particularly when they've gone off sick, either because of the emotional impact of it or indeed because physically they have been hurt. And we have recently started having regular meetings that the police have joined us just to think through and to talk about how all of this is going. The last staff survey results that we see from the survey of last year shows that in Oxleas, only 12.3% of staff reported who were surveyed or who responded to the survey reported experiencing this, whereas in the previous year it was 16.7%. So it's going in the right direction. But I would still argue that 12.3% is too high, because no one comes to work to be assaulted. We all come to work to help people whom we recognize have difficulties, but assault just wouldn't help our staff, particularly because of the impact of that on them emotionally, to then continue to work with people in the close proximity that we have to work with them. So I'm really excited that colleagues from the Met Police are able to join us to talk about this. I think this is going to really, really help us drive down the incidence of violence and aggression towards staff.
Thanks, Iffy. And, I know from talking to a number of our staff, including within the Tarn, about the impact that an assault can have on them and how upsetting it can be. So I think it's great that we're starting to put these structures and these protections in place. So we're joined first by Inspector Rachel Cross. So Rachel, could you tell us a bit about Operation Cavell and what you're hoping to achieve working with your partners here in the NHS?
Yeah, sure. So it began really with reviewing how our approach to assaults on our own staff were handled and progressed over the last few years. And we instigated Operation Hampshire, which actually has increased positive outcome rates against police members by 75%. Our outcome rate is now sitting there much higher. We're talking probably doubling what it was prior to Op Hampshire, and that led us to think, we're finally getting it right for our own staff, but what about our colleagues in the NHS? We were very aware that not only are NHS staff underreporting assaults against them, whether it be verbal or physical, but that when they are reporting them, perhaps we weren't giving the best service that we could to those victims of crime. And that's what's important to remember, is that they are not just doing their jobs. It's not something that's by the by that comes with their work. It is an assault, and they are victims. And it was about providing a better service to them, like we have our own officers. And to do that, we've instigated a pilot, first of all, on the South Area BCU from October to January this year. And it was about encouraging NHS workers to firstly report those crimes, and then giving our officers the knowledge and the tools to sufficiently investigate those crimes and get a positive outcome. And that pilot saw positive outcomes increase, quadrupled actually, positive outcomes. And when I'm talking about those outcomes, I'm talking about charges, cautions, P&Ds. These are all kind of positive, recordable outcomes that sit on somebody's record. Mm-hmm. And not only that, it's about encouraging your staff in the NHS to realise that whilst somebody may be struggling with a mental health condition, that necessarily doesn't prevent a conviction or a prosecution. And it's about instilling that knowledge within your staff, but also within our own staff, because for too long, officers have kind of believed that somebody with a mental health issue couldn't be prosecutable, and actually they can be. And if we get that say so from a doctor to say they had I don't want to use the word capacity, but you know what I mean. It does kind of pave the way for that conviction, and it shows suspects that actually there are consequences to their actions, and hopefully that will then prevent them making that same mistake another time when coming into contact with either an NHS worker, a police officer, or any other member of the public. So, and that's where we are today, is encouraging staff to report, and for our staff in the police to progress those reports sufficiently and do their best for the victims of crime in the NHS.
That's fantastic to hear about, and because I think one of the things I often hear from staff, and I've been in environments where people have been assaulted. I've been part of having someone prosecuted when I was working in an acute hospital for him assaulting staff as well. I think there was a sense and there was a kind of fear that, well, we don't know what will happen. We don't know if the police will respond. And there was a particular concern, I think, around people with mental illness and whether they would be held accountable. And, you know, I've heard people say, well, I don't know if there's much point because I'm sure that their mental illness will be used as a reason to not take this forward. But I think what you're saying, I think Verity as well, joined by Sergeant Verity Hale at Verity, this is something I think you've been talking to some of our NHS Trust colleagues about, how we proceed in those circumstances.
Yeah, so I've been largely responsible for publicity, really, getting out into hospitals and trusts to try and get the message across to your staff. We also expanded Operation Cavell to look at racial abuse, and actually that's something that we're very passionate about, educating staff that even if they don't actually want to go to court, no matter how much we try and persuade people, we still want to listen. We still want to assign an officer to speak to you and to understand how that's impacted you and put you in touch with partner agencies, basically, that we've got in place to support staff. It's a really, I'm very passionate about Operation Cavell. So I'd encourage you to speak to your managers, secure my details, and I will come into your places of work gladly and give as much support as I can.
And I'm glad you've raised the issue of racial abuse as well. And I do remember vividly one of our members of staff, who's a black member of staff. He said to me that his experience of working in an inpatient ward, he said he remembered going home to his wife one night and saying, I know that words can't harm me anymore because if they could, I'd be dead from the abuse I've experienced today. And, this is that, and that was, I thought, a tremendously vivid explanation of the degree of abuse he was experiencing in an inpatient setting. And unfortunately, I don't think it's that uncommon for some of our staff who go into work knowing that they will face abuse over the course of the day. And I think, what I've heard from you both, and I've heard from you there, Rachel, about your own workforce as much as ours is, public servants, people who work in the statutory sector, people who are doing a job to protect and help the public and care for the public. We shouldn't have to tolerate this, should we? And this is part of you helping us get that message across.
Yeah, absolutely. And, now more than ever, as we've gone through this last year in lockdown, we've seen racial abuse rise as a result. It's more important now than ever to get this right and to deliver the best service of care we can. And Operation Cavell is a means to doing that.
And I think there's been very much, much as all the clapping and stuff was lovely. I think what people are talking about now is, fair pay, proper protection from abuse, that kind of thing, and I think it's great to feel as though we've got the support of you there in the Met to help us with this. You're partners that we respect and value because you help us with some of our most difficult circumstances, but it's tremendously welcome that you've been here today to tell us a bit more about Operation Cavell. Was there anything else you wanted to mention today that I've not managed to cover?
No, I don't think so. Just the message is, please report, and we will give our best service to you. So please do.
Thank you. Well, look, we're really, really grateful for this. We'll look out for you. We'll look out for more information about this and very much encourage staff across Oxleas to keep an eye on the Ox, speak within your team meetings about this. And as all of us can attest, this is a hugely welcome initiative. Thank you very much to Inspector Cross and Sergeant Hale for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, now next up, I'm going to talk shortly to KELLI and to Neil about our staff mental health staff network, which we've been doing a lot of work on recently, actually. We'll be hearing a bit more about that. But first off, we've got a new short animated film on our new strategy. Our strategy has been signed off recently by the board, Council of Governors and exec team, and we've put together a short film here to sort of bring it to life for you, and it brings together our values, our objectives as an organisation, and says a bit about the kind of place we want Oxleas to be. And after that, I'll be coming back to talk to KELLI and Neil. So let's have a look at that film now.
At Oxleas, we've been thinking about what you really need us to focus on over the next 3 years. We talked to lots of people, including colleagues who work at Oxleas, people who use our services, and their families, and the partners we work with. We also thought about what we've learned over the past year from COVID-19. This is what you said was important to you. Achieving 0 delays, delivering great out-of-hospital care, making Oxleas a great place to work. These have become the 3 big priorities of our new strategy. To achieve this, we'll need to make changes such as 1. Quality management, 2. Bolstering our service user, patient, carer involvement and co-production. 3. Creating a safety and learning culture. 4. Increasing our focus on service inequalities. 5. Effective partnership working. 6. Reducing violence, aggression and abuse against our staff. 7. Increasing digital and remote service delivery. 8. Making best use of our resources. You also told us that Oxleas' value should be: we're kind, we're fair, we listen, we care. We're looking forward to working with you over the coming months to put these plans into action. Visit the Ox to find out more.
It's a cracking piece of animation there. Thank you very much to the communications team who've put that together, and thanks to Rachel, Claire, Sally and the team who've really helped us develop the strategy. I think it's a great piece of work, and I think it's good to have an organisational strategy that talks sense, makes sense, and when you read it you think, I recognise the organisation are working in that. I think it's really important that it feels like something that aligns with what we're all trying to do day in, day out here at Oxleas. Now I'm joined now by Neil Springham, our Exec Director of Therapies, and KELLI, who is our lead now for our mental health staff network. And KELLI's been doing some fantastic work on this over the course of the last... How long is it now, KELLI? Is it 6 months or so, or a year now?
It's about 6 months, I think, Matthew.
I've lost track of all sense of what time is over the course of the pandemic, but I know you and I have been speaking regularly about this. So tell us a bit about the network then, KELLI, and what it's for people here at Oxleas.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Well, for those who don't know me, my name is KELLI Rush, and I'm proud to be the chair of the Oxleas Mental Health Staff Network we're unveiling today. I've worked for Oxleas for over 2 years now and have an extensive experience working in several different secondary mental health teams and undertaking bank work in many locations. I have a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, depression and anxiety, which I feel places me well to represent Oxleas staff who may be suffering with mental health difficulties of any kind. Firstly, I'd like to say on behalf of the network members a big thank you to Neil and Matthew for their support and assistance with the creation of this mental health staff network. We're all really excited about this new venture and how it can improve the lives of those with experiences of mental illness in the workplace.
Sorry, Kelly, go on.
No, it's okay.
I was just jumping in because I think one of the things that's really struck me about it is the enthusiasm that you and the team with Neil have put together around this, because we had before, didn't we, the lived experience network within Oxleas, but I think there was some good work went into that, but there was a sense that it was quite below the radar, and I think people were kind of uncomfortable talking about it. And you've been very open today about your diagnosis and your own challenges with your mental health, and I've been along to speak to the network as well. I mean, I had years of cognitive behavioural therapy myself after I was diagnosed with cyclothymia, which is the sort of form of bipolar, back in 2007, I think, and we've all sort of sat there and shared some of those experiences, and how sometimes it took me years before I could talk about that openly at work. And I think there's been a sense that a lot of us have been kind of keeping this stuff under the radar because we've been concerned about stigma. We've found it hard to talk about. But what I've found within the network is a place where we're all able to be much more open about this and draw strength from that. And I think this is really part of what you're trying to achieve here, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. And this is why we've created the Mental Health Staff Network, primarily in response to the stresses placed on staff during the COVID pandemic. So we want to open the Mental Health Staff Network to all Oxleas NHS Foundation Trust staff. We want to empower people to feel safe in coming forward to join with us. People may have suffered with feelings of isolation, anxiety or depression for the first time during the lockdown, and there will be others who have very sadly suffered bereavement. So to the network, we welcome all Oxleas staff, whether you have a mental health diagnosis, whether you have lived experience of an enduring mental health issue, or whether you'd just like space to talk through difficult experiences relating to your mental health with other people who've experienced similar things. Everybody is welcome.
And I think that's a really important point, isn't it? It's not just, we all have mental health. We have good mental health and we have bad mental health. Some of us have got a diagnosis of something that's a mental illness as well. But, what we want this to be is a place where anyone who's experiencing problems and challenges and wants someone to talk to or just somewhere to listen to, where they can find that space. So I think it has been a hard year, and I don't think it's at all unreasonable. I think it would be unusual if people hadn't felt low at times over the last year, particularly with some of the life experiences we've had. And we want this to be a place where we can welcome that range, that spectrum of different experiences forward. I mean, Neil, you've been working with KELLI, and we've talked quite a bit about this. I mean, there's a real place for a network like this at any time, but more so probably after the last 12 months than we've ever seen, really.
I think so, Matthew. And I think you say it really well, that I think for those of us who sort of deliver services, sometimes I think it's quite hard to accept help, because I think we tell ourselves that maybe I'm not a very good therapist. I went through a period of anxiety myself, and I can remember thinking, well, maybe this means I'm not a very good therapist. And actually, the weird thing is, now I look back on it, I actually think it made me a much better practitioner, because I have insights, the empathy, but also have a sense of what works. So I think these are difficult times, and I think many of us are noticing how it accumulates, just how those little social contacts or the things that we used to have in our normal life kind of keep us afloat. And I think there's an extra barrier for staff worrying that perhaps they can't come forward because it's that thing of maybe I'm not very good at my job. But I think the opposite is true. So we will welcome everyone. And actually, not just for support, but because I think you do gain things through these experiences as well.
I mean, I agree. I think I had a really good session with some members of the network a couple of months ago, where we all spoke pretty openly, I think, about some of our experiences, and including me talking about some of my experiences. I mean, I lost a job at one point due to my mental ill health in my late 20s, where I didn't complete my probation. And it's all those things, and they're big life-changing events, actually. But you do draw strength from your ability to work your way through these. We talked a bit about the grief you feel, I think, about the life you've left behind as well before you became unwell as well, and how that changes your perception of you. But there's things. It's like you said, Neil. You think, well, things could have been different, but I would never want to have not had some of those experiences that I've had, and to draw some of those strengths that I've had as a result of it. And it's not an easy subject to talk about, is it? KELLI, it's something where I think, you've become practiced about talking about it in others, but there might be people who just want to come along and be quiet and listen. But what sort of support or opportunities could people expect through the network?
Well, peer support groups is going to be one of the main functions of the network, hopefully. And Neil and I were also speaking over the last few days about offering individual support or group support to people who are in that place where they're not quite ready to be open about their mental illness. And they may have concerns about disclosing or identifying as having mental illness within the workplace. So I'm really pleased to say that Neil has offered his services to anybody who might be in that position and not be feeling comfortable to come forward and may want to have a few conversations around, the barriers and how they can be overcome, or as changes and improvements are made within Oxleas, the hope is that people will feel a little bit more comfortable to come forwards. But there are many benefits of membership. We want, you may want to receive support or offer support to others. A lot of NHS staff are clinicians and may be able to use those skills to run peer support groups, which are really helpful to other clinicians, for example. We want a lot of support to address the misunderstandings, the stigma and the stereotyping of people with mental health difficulties, and empowering staff members who may be experiencing mental health difficulties and reduce experiences of marginalisation and isolation in the workplace. Ideally, we'd like to promote parity of esteem between mental and physical health, because we think that would be really useful. But we also would like to create a respectful environment which helps staff with mental illness, mental health issues, feel able to be open about their experiences.
I think that's important. It's about creating an environment where people feel as though they have the choice to do it should they want to. And on one level, it's very easy for me to talk about my experiences because I'm the chief exec of the place, and I recognise I'm a white middle-aged man in a very senior job, and I'm pretty protected, and so I can talk about this, and I think there's not going to be any comeback to me for talking openly about this. But I suspect people in different roles within the organisations feel differently, and I suspect also if you're in, some of our services, they see, to be quite crude about it, they see the worst side of mental illness, don't they? They see really quite profoundly ill people, very unwell people who are often in a very disturbed place with very challenging behaviour day in, day out. And if you associate mental illness with going into a workplace where you experience abuse and you experience some of the violence we've just been talking about there, I think there's an educational component to this, isn't it? It's about talking about the range of that. And I've been struck recently, our conversations about microaggressions, our conversations about creating an environment that's more tolerant of difference and supporting people from different ethnic backgrounds, recognising gender and sexuality, recognising this lived experience. This is, as ever, it's a plea for tolerance and kindness, curiosity and understanding, and that's a really critical thread that's running through all this work around building a fairer Oxleas, isn't it? And I know both of you are big fans and big supporters of this kind of agenda within the Trust. So Kelly, where can people find out more about the network then?
Well, we've just had our page go live on the Ox. Thanks very much to Steve and the comms team. So you can find more information there. I find it easy to locate the staff networks on the Ox. If you type staff networks into the search bar, and it will bring up the whole family of staff networks that are available. So, there may be people that wish to join us, hopefully, or may find that they identify with other staff networks as well. There is an application form for membership of the Mental Health Staff Network, which you can find on the web page. And there's one other thing I wanted to say, is to just reassure people. One of the things that we've taken the decision to exclude from the Mental Health Staff Network is associate members or hidden members or all types of members. So the Mental Health Staff Network is offering full membership to all staff, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're coming out as having mental illness, because the membership is aimed at people who are carers, people who may have a friend or a family member who's suffering with mental illness and they'd like to support our cause. We no longer have associate members, so there's no distinction amongst the membership, but by the same token, being a member of the Mental Health Staff Network is not necessarily saying I have mental health issues. So I just thought that was important to mention for people who may not feel ready yet to take that step.
I understand that. I mean, my wife's a mental health first aider in her workplace, and certainly her experience of living with me over the years, she's had to put up with a lot. Sometimes that sounds some pretty awful behaviours on my part as well when I've been particularly unwell, and I think she's found support through that as well. So I think it's what we're saying is the network's there for people whose lives have been affected by mental ill health, whether it's they themselves or those they care about, or their desire to find that space where they can share some of that experience as well. So I'm really pleased you've been able to do this, Kelly. Really appreciate the time you've put in, and Neil, as ever, really grateful for your ongoing sponsorship of this. And Neil, we need to get you back to talk with Japleen a bit more about lived experience at some point as well, because I think it's a really important part of what Oxleas does, and I think we do it better than any trust in the country pretty much, which is bringing people with lived experience right into the heart of our workforce as well. And it can only improve our ability to deliver care if we can reflect on that huge range of experiences that all of us can bring to the workplace. Thanks very much, Kelly. Thanks as ever, Neil. Good to speak to you both again.
Thanks, Matthew.
Okay. All right, folks. So that has been some good, interesting discussions there. And as ever, Oxleas and the NHS, it's all about our staff. It's all about you who work for us here at Oxleas and the care that you deliver. And I think with this focus on offering better protection and support for those of you that are experiencing physical, verbal abuse at work, and getting that message out that you shouldn't have to tolerate that. You shouldn't have to come into work to face abuse all day and feel as though you're not supported both by us as a trust, but also by the Met and others, to get that message across to people that they should be held accountable to their actions. Really important message. But also in the concept of the network, this is an organisation where I want people with all kinds of different experiences to feel as though they're respected, that they're given the time and space to talk about things or to be listened to. And it has been a hard old year. It was interesting. I mean, me and my family, we finally managed to get 2 nights away from home over the Easter holidays, just in a wee self-catering place. And when we got there, I was surprised to find how emotional I became just at being somewhere else and just looking out on a different view after 7 months of looking at the same things and being around the same people. And just that sense of that change we've been through over the last 12 months. We draw great strength from one another through this, through the people we work with and the people that we care for. And as ever, I'm just really proud of the way the whole organisation's embraced this sense of building a fairer Oxleas through our strategy. We've got a long way to go, and all this says is the whole NHS. But I think in the last 12 months, in some incredibly challenging circumstances, we've made a very strong start. And thanks to all of you who've contributed to that. So, with no further ado, I'm going to go and get outside and get some fresh air and sunshine on me as I head over to Oxleas House to see some of the stuff over there. Hope you have a good rest of your Friday and a great weekend, folks, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.